So today's topic is summer photography. So a couple of things about the summer is when we talked about fall photography and spring photography and the beautiful light that we have during that time of year, as opposed to summer, the good thing about the light is that we have really long days. In fact, we're coming up on the solstice, and so we have tons of daylight to be able to get out and photograph. But with that daylight, the light is very contrasty. You have a very small window in time in the beginning and the end of days before you get really severe contrast in your light. And you just have to plan for it or deal with the fact that you have that type of conditions. The other thing about summer photography is that you can get an effect heat shimmer, particularly if you are near water or at the beach, which will cause your images to look like they're distorted or out of focus. But the most important thing about summer photography is that it's a fun time of year, and it's a great time to be able to capture the really fun time of summer. So I'm going to cover a few different areas that you may be interested in photographing as we get into summer. And given that we're in mid-June with 4th of July coming up, fireworks is always a topic of interest for people to do photography. And so a couple of things with fireworks. If you remember the presentation that Megan did on night photography, it's pretty much like the aurora or night photography in terms of the challenges and the techniques you use. The difference is a little bit of the speed at which you might want to be able to take these pictures. So if you're doing fireworks and you have a camera that requires a tripod, definitely a tripod helps. Cable release is just a shutter release. You can do it with a remote release. You could do it with a timer if you don't have a cable release. I bought a Bluetooth. I don't know if everybody can see my image, but this is a little Bluetooth device for my iPhone that triggers the shutter. And so I can put my iPhone up near my hummingbird feeders or out in the field if I was taking firework photos and use the triggering device to trigger it. It was not very expensive at all, and it actually works. So with fireworks, you want to get there early to get a good spot, to set up in an open area where you can get like a 45-degree angle between your tripod and where the fireworks are going to be shown. And the other thing about your setup is you want to anticipate the height of the fireworks. That takes some trial and error, but it's better to shoot a little bit wider if you're going to be setting up on a tripod for fireworks, and leave some room because you don't want to cut off the tops of the fireworks. The other thing is that your flash is not going to help you. It will actually hurt your images. You want it dark where you are and light where the fireworks are. So make sure on your camera phones or on your regular cameras, if you're in an auto mode, shut your flash off. Make sure it doesn't trigger. Particularly if there's other people taking fireworks, they will not like you if you start to do flashing because it will affect their photos. So the way you do focusing for fireworks is the same way you would do it if we were trying to take a picture of the Milky Way or stars or the aurora, is that prior to it getting dark, you manually focus on a building, tree, or landmark out near your infinity point or where you think the fireworks might explode. If there's not a building, you can focus on an infinity. It's not as good as trying to get a sort of area where you do focus to try to get that as sharp as possible. The recommended aperture is f8 or f11 if your lens goes to that, just to get the needed depth of field that you can you can get the entire display in. But you're far enough away. If you have to, you can go down an f-stop and still be okay. And try using ISO 100 or 200 and see if that works. And we're going to talk about shutter speed next. With some of the newer cameras, I would, if you're starting to see things and they look too dark, I would push the ISO up a little bit. On your phone cameras, you want to definitely enable your high definition HDR. Use your focus and exposure lock, and the way you do it on all the phone cameras is you tap the area of the screen and you hold it. On the iPhone, it will be a square. On the Androids, it's typically a round area. You want to shoot in burst mode, trying to hold as still as you can while you shoot if you don't have it either on, set up on something resting on a wall or on a tripod. And you can also do the trick that we've talked about a lot with birds and with other moving items, is shoot video. The iPhones do and Androids do an incredible job with video. And then you can screen capture a single frame. And that's true too. If you have your regular camera, you might want to also with your regular camera shoot some video, because it would be sort of fun. The other huge tip about doing fireworks is that as the fireworks continue, the atmosphere gets more smoky. And with more smoky atmosphere, it's harder to get this sort of crisp image. So you want to be able to shoot as many of your fireworks pictures as early in the display as possible to get the best focus. So I had another screen. I also want to go back on fireworks. Start with your shutter speed at a half second or a second to see if that will work for giving you enough light on the fireworks. And then try, if you're starting to get too much blur with it, then increase your shutter speed. So that's the recommended shutter speed on fireworks. Anyone else have experience with doing fireworks and have any tips that you would add? Dennis, have you played with fireworks at all?
Actually, the last time I shot fireworks was out in California with my film camera, and that worked out pretty good. I was going to suggest Memorial Day, not this year, but next, down at Wolf Trap. It probably has the best fireworks I've ever seen, because you sit on a hill and they start the fireworks down below and go up.
Yeah, and one thing I've always thought about doing and just haven't done it is get up on Skyline Drive and get to one of the overlooks that's looking looking into the towns in the valley, maybe looking west, and watch the fireworks from Skyline Drive. That could be really a fun, different way of shooting them too. I just haven't, every time I think about it, then I don't do it. But even from my deck here, I can sort of see the ones in the 4-H center. I can see a little bit of Bentonville or it just would be really sort of a neat thing to do, is to pick an overlook and try to see if you could watch them from there. One year when we still lived near DC, we did dinner at the Kennedy Center and watched the fireworks from the roof of the Kennedy Center. And that was really fun until it got pretty smoky. But yeah, fireworks are fun. They're a challenge, but you can do them. You can try them with your camera phones. And The other thing you can do is if you're having no luck with that, take some pictures of the people in silhouette. So, you know, that's one area that you can try. So campfires, that's another area, and I'm getting ready to do some photography for of some campfires nearby for a brochure. So with the campfires, you can decide what you want to do. And so these settings would be if you want the campfire in detail and the rest of the scene dark. You can also do fires a different way, just like water. Think of fire as water. You can also slow your shutter speed and then blur the flames of the fire. Sometimes with a fire, if it's burning really hot to begin with, it can be more white. So sometimes you need to wait to get sort of some color into the fire until it cools a little bit. But definitely for your campfires, if you want detail, start with a fast shutter speed. The recommended aperture is f8 if you want details. Again, if you want to blur the fire, you can go with a more shallow depth of field. And you want to use the lowest ISO you can so that you avoid noise. And just again, a couple of things. I had this discussion with the photographer I was with in North Carolina. The newer cameras can handle higher ISOs, and there's a software program, Topaz, that does an incredible job at removing noise and keeping detail. So again, if you're not getting enough, just push your ISO up a little bit if you want to stay at f8. And the reason f8, if you look at the picture from Getty Images here, is you've got depth of field in the front of the fire, and you're getting some detail of the woods behind it. Compromise too, you could go down with your f-stop to let more light in, but you may not have as much detail. Again, those trade-offs that you might have. So my next slide, when it comes up on your machines, is beach photography. And the picture on this slide is from the Outer Banks. And these are wild horses. And what I learned about doing wild horse photography is when you have more than one of them, inevitably their heads are all in different positions. And you know, this is about as close as I got to all of them, 4 of them looking up at the same time. I have probably 30 other pictures where one of their heads is not in the right place. The other thing that we were trying to do is make sure you got a tiny bit of each horse's tail in the picture, you know, so it was a challenge. But this was pretty late in the day, and they finally walked along the beach, and they had some really pretty reflections going on in the sand. But we probably spent 3 hours chasing the horses on the beach. So with any beach photography, and hopefully everybody gets to go and do a little beach time this summer, is that the water reflects an incredible amount of light, as does white sand. If you're on white sand, or even the shiny mud, it's like a giant reflector. So you can have an overcast day, you can take advantage of bad weather. Like if the weather's not looking good, you may have still a ton of light on the beach, because you've got like this giant reflector in the water and on the sand. Remember to use your lens hoods all summer. Make sure you use your lens hoods. The lens hoods, and that's the sort of front of the camera, little extra plastic, usually piece that goes on. And if you don't have a lens hood and you have a lens, I would recommend getting one for 2 reasons. One, your lens hood protects your lens from blowing sand. I have knocked the front of my camera and nicked my lens hood even with my big 600, and it hasn't affected the lens because I've got that little extra protection. The other reason why lens hoods exist is to prevent too much lens flare. So it helps to reduce the amount of sun that would create those sort of flaring little lights that end up in your pictures in the end. And some people love lens flare. And you can intentionally have it. And sometimes when you're shooting towards the sun at sunset, you're going to get lens flare, even if you've got the world's biggest hood on it. But if your lens came with a hood, even though it adds a little bit of weight and it can make it less balanced, please use your lens hoods. When we were in North Carolina, there were 4 of us in the group and 2 people didn't have their lens hoods on. I just, and they had them. It's really, really, really important to do. The other thing is the worst thing for your cameras is sand. Sand, if it gets into your lenses, particularly if you have a zoom lens, they're extremely hard to fix and to blow the sand out. And so I use on beaches, I will have a rain guard on my camera just to prevent sand from getting into the gaskets. And my cameras, being pro bodies, are a little bit better sealed than some of the entry-level bodies. So even if your camera is like super weather sealed and tough, please, protect your gear on the beach. The other thing is that's probably the only time I do put a clear or UV filter in front of my camera is when I'm on a beach for sea salt and also for blowing sand, because it can scratch the front of your camera. So when we were on the beach and if a vehicle would come by as we were photographing on the beach, a lot of times I'm conscious and I turn the camera and put the lens towards my body to keep from dust and sand scratching. So the trick on a white sandy beach with a lot of light is the same trick as snow. What you do is you point your camera to the white sandy beach. This isn't true if you've got like more of a New England beach that's gray. But if you're on like the Outer Banks or Chincoteague or Assateague where it's mainly white sand, is I will point my camera to the white sand in the direction I'm photographing. And then I exposure compensate +2. Because if I don't, that camera again wants to move everything to middle gray. So instead of these horses being on a white sandy beach with a reflection, these horses would have looked like they were standing in sort of mucky gray. When I was looking through and I was manually exposing, but if you're in aperture priority, find the exposure compensation and go up 2 stops. And if you're then seeing that it's overexposing, or if you're getting blinkies, then you can move down. But that's your starting point. Same thing on your phone cameras, is that you may have to overexpose, because otherwise, to get the detail of the reflection and the detail in the horse's body, it required, even though I was in all this bright sun, that it required me to do a little exposure compensation. And I think I've already beaten the point of protect your camera gear, but it's really, really important on a beach to have something to put your camera in. The camera phones I have on the front of my camera phone, I have a glass screen that is protecting the actual screen of the camera phone. And I have like rubber, and I've used this phone in the Falkland Islands and blowing horrible sand that was everywhere. And the glass that I was told would never scratch, they guaranteed it, is all scratched up from the Falklands, from that driving sand. So do protect your phone cameras as well as your other gear. So, but this was at, again, the Outer Banks. This was my first trip to the Outer Banks. And so we did a variety, including the horses. And it was really difficult. We had to wait a long time for the beaches to clear out of the human species, because they were not real attractive to take pictures of. Most of them. Some of them were pretty, but most of the other species on the beach were not of interest to me. Okay, so in the summer, like this week, have you gotten out to take photos? The rain and not so great days in the summer are actually great days for photography. Because one of the things that happens when you get this overcast light, and I'm looking out right now, and I wouldn't want to take a landscape picture because it's sort of hazy, but it's like a giant softbox because there's a lot of light out there. That sun is so strong. It's going through the clouds, and you can actually create much softer, less contrasty pictures in the rain. And so this is some tassel rue or ruin, meadow rue. It goes by different names up in the national park. And that day was really overcast, but it's just a different feel. And so one of the biggest problems of summer photography is all this light and this contrasty, but take advantage of these rainy days to get these soft, rainy, dewy pictures with filtered light. So it just gives you the feel. You can almost feel the mist of being in with the rain. And yesterday I decided I'd go out on my deck and take pictures of the birds in the rain. And so the next screen is a couple of pictures I snapped off quickly yesterday. And the week before this, the birds were doing nothing. Like midday, they are panting. They looked stressed and terrible. And actually, in the last few days, the birds have been pretty active and happy in the rain. And so, and the colors were really, really rich. And I was undercover because my deck has a cover on it. But the one on the left is our ruby throat, and it is really hard to get in bright sun. It's hard to get that red of the neck and all of the detail. And if you really look at this picture, it's a very shallow depth of field. So what my focus point was the head and the neck. And then if you start to look at it, and this is the trick about pictures, is when you first look at it, it looks all in focus. But if you really look at it, the feathers on the back are out of focus. The leaves behind the hummingbirds out of focus. The raindrops are not in focus. And that's because I was shooting this at f2.8. And so, and it was at the end of the day, I almost had zero light, but there was enough light that when the hummingbird turned, there was enough ambient light that I was getting this incredible richness of the red throat that I can never get on sunny days. On sunny days, this bird looks, the red almost oversaturates my camera. So I was sort of happy that I had that chance to photograph in the rain, and you can see the raindrops on the top of his bill. So, if you look out and you say, oh, this is such a lousy day, it's not a great day to go out because, it's rainy. What am I going to take pictures of in the rain? The birds in rain are, and their feathers look different, and they're fluffy and they're active. And he was just great. He had a catch light in his eye, and his chest looks gray. Usually we think of hummingbirds as being white, but you get all that detail. And again, you have to have a camera or a lens that has enough light. And I wasn't taking him flying. I just didn't have the light to do birds in flight. but I was watching him and he was starting to defend the feeder. We're getting either some young or females are coming off their nest, or we're just getting more activity. So definitely birds in the rain. The one on the right is a young downy woodpecker, and you can tell that he's a young guy because the red is up towards his forehead instead of on the back. And his feathers were all puffed up. And again, an opportunity to snap a picture in the rain. So don't don't forget to use rain as your friend in these hot summer months. And then the final rain picture I'm going to share is a fern called a maidenhair fern. And again, this was taken the same day as when I was in the park with the tassel rue. And it's just that richness that, again, that green is so saturated, mainly because I'm not having that glaring overhead light. And so, so times that are really fun to do rain is after a rainstorm, particularly in the morning. That's when all the spider webs and are just lit up with dew. So again, don't let the weather, bad weather is actually an okay thing to get some dramatic skies. And so don't put your cameras away just because it's raining. So the other thing that's really fun to take pictures of in the summer are kids splashing, our dogs splashing. And with splashing water, again, it's water. We did a whole thing on waterfalls. If you want to make the splash to freeze it, you need a fairly fast shutter speed. And you can set up, like if you have kids or grandkids or a dog, you can set up with some nice overhead shades so the light's not harsh. Shoot 1/1000 or greater. If you really want the drops to freeze, it's 1/3200. And shoot in bursts if you're on a camera that's in your phone. And then try different angles. What would it look like if you were lower, higher? You know, if you got in the pool and protected your camera equipment, you know, or laid, if there's a pool and you can lay on the wall and take that from a long lens back. What does the splash look like if you're eye level instead of shooting down on it all the time? Or even lower. But yeah, definitely water play is a really fun thing to do in summer light. The other thing that's fun to play with in the summer is reflections. So, you know, if you on the beach and somebody's got sunglasses on, always look at what's in their sunglasses, because you can get some really cool pictures using sunglasses. And you can even put sunglasses down. Like you can create a whole little scene where you use the sunglasses, particularly if they're the mirrored ones. And you could create like little shells and set them up and then put the sunglasses just right. And then take your whole scene in the sun up. And I'm almost wondering if they put the image in the glasses afterwards. I'm trying to figure out whether or not technically you could get that look. But yeah, look at people's, like if you're on the beach and you're having people are there, look at what's in their sunglasses. I've done that with snow goggles too. It's just a fun, creative thing to do. And my next slide says, summer food is really fun. And so another thing you can do, again, it's a hot day, you don't want to be outside. So maybe you're inside or maybe you're on a covered little area, is to do some food photography. Because look at all the fun foods we have in the summer. We've got barbecues, we've got all sorts of fruit and vegetables and farmers markets. And so food photography can be a really, really fun thing to do in the summer. And so whether it's dessert that you've made, or people, particularly kids, eating watermelons or eating ice cream, it's just the joy and the richness of fruit. And then this other picture I pulled from Getty Images is just the idea of doing a still life of, I sort of love this little cone and then the fruit arranged to create this sort of perfect little picture. And I also saw, and I don't know if anybody else has seen these, is that you can take berries like blueberries or raspberries and you can start spelling things out like summer fun or something with the berries themselves and take pictures of the berries. So, this is a great time of year to, again, do something with food, with picnics, setups, with wine. If you're going to a vineyard and you're sitting there, all the richness of summer to do with food. And if you've got one of the newer Android phones, they actually have a food setting, and some of the phones you can you can you can take them. What you'd want to do with the picture on the far right is make sure, like on the iPhone, that you're taking it and you're level. So if you have your grid on and your level, make sure that those two crosses meet in the middle. And there's a way to do that on the Androids too. But there are food settings that really do enrich the food. The other thing is, on some of the cameras, you might even have, if your camera has a scenic or scene mode, you can set it for food. You can also, some of them set for fireworks. I even think some of the Androids, there's a fireworks setting. So the other thing to do is, if the summer heat is really, really hot and the sun is coming down, we've got incredibly wonderful places that you can get out of the direct sunlight and take a hike into the woods. So, the difference between, and there are some adorable pictures right now coming out of big meadows of moms with baby deer, with fawns. I mean, incredible. There's a Facebook group that a few of us are members of, that's just for Shenandoah National Park, and there's just so many adorable little fawn pictures. But if you were up in big meadows, you wouldn't want to be there at noon for two reasons. The deer tend to not be moving around as much, but also there's just not a whole lot of area for shade, although you can walk down the road there and it is more shaded in the woods. But there's a lot of things to take pictures of in the woods. There's flowers that come in the summer, the columbine, and also fly poison is a really pretty picture that you can do in Shenandoah National Park in the woods. So, if it's a sunny day, find or create shade. So I have some other pictures that I took recently on the river, because the river can be an incredible challenge to photograph. I did a photography session for the Shenandoah River Keepers, and it was an incredibly contrasty day. It was one of our most hot, humid, horrible days. And the problem with the river floats is they all start at 10 o'clock. So even by the time we were on the river, the sun was horrible. But every time somebody got into shade, I was like, oh, great. I can get that moment in shade. And what I did with these two pictures is I said, if they're contrasty, I'm going to stay with the contrast. And I almost, in post-production, because they're using them in publications and things, I almost oversaturated and and even made them more contrasty. So, but I was really happy when everybody got into that little shaded area, but I had the reflection in the front. And the one on the left of the woman in the kayak, that would just, getting the light in the water and getting the color even reflecting in the ore, just um, was 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 really pretty. I just darkened everything else, but that was a challenge. So you have to use the light you have. And so if you're in contrast, you might say, well, I'm going to maximize that contrast. I'm going to look for reflections in the water. I'm going to look at what I can do to deal with this sort of harsh light. The other thing we have in this area that's really great fun to do in the summer is to visit the different pollinator gardens. Sally, is the pollinator garden at Sky Meadows, what shape is that in?
I haven't been up there. I've been at Turner Pond, but I haven't been up to the Pollinator Gardens yet. I know at the end of last summer, I mean, everything had grown up there tremendously, and I was able to get some wonderful butterfly photographs up there. The butterflies were all over those plants. So I don't know really the short-tooth mountain mint. I don't know if they're in bloom yet so much. I'm going to try to go up there and check it out, like maybe this week.
Yeah. And I know at Shenandoah River Park, the pollinator gardens weren't mowed, so they were not in great shape last year. One of the naturalists just called me. I know they didn't have a naturalist last year either at Shenandoah River. They were putting their staff all into maintaining their cabins. But they are doing programs this year. So I know at Seven Bends, they did mow and plant their pollinator gardens. So Seven Bends, they'll be in better shape. But Sky Meadows has a really pretty pollinator garden. Again, when you come in to the park, you take a right-hand turn into the picnic area towards the sensory trail. There's also a pollinator garden that they had all along the right-hand side as you went up to the old mansion there. And as Sally said, it was a great place for getting all different butterflies and dragonflies, odonata. It's a really pretty garden to do. And the nice thing about the one near the pollinator garden is that there is some shade, or near the Century Trail is that there is some shade there. It's not harsh light all day, because there's some trees that help. The picture on the screen is an indigo bunting on a sunflower, and that's like the classic picture that you get at McKee-Berkshire's wildlife management area, which is, it's a little bit of a drive. It's in Maryland, and it's really fun to do, but you have to get there early because the fields are just plain open. So I probably, got there about 6 a.m. and by 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, it was getting to be a little bit bright. But you can go on this website, or you can do a Google search, and they will tell you what the stage of the sunflowers are. And they've got like 3 or 4 different fields of sunflowers. And it just, even if you don't get a bird on a sunflower, the sunflowers themselves are pretty awesome. And some of the challenges is deciding, are you going to do a massive field of sunflowers, or are you just going to get one on the edge? And the trick with this bunting is that everybody else was roaming around looking for buntings. And if you go listen to what the bunting call is, if you don't know it, it's sort of like sweet, 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 sweet. And we heard it before we saw it. And what they do is they dart from the wooded area that's near the fields onto a sunflower and then dart back. And so we didn't wander. We said, we hear one nearby. We're just going to wait and see if we can see where it lands. But if you keep moving around and some people are walking through the sunflowers, it's quite a spectacle there. There are no restrooms there. And it is, if you end up on a sunny day, which you do want a certain amount of light, because the indigo buntings will look just like no color when they're not in the light. They sort of, their color is actually, their feathers are reflecting light. They don't have color themselves. So, but that's a really good little field trip, and you can go through. Unfortunately, White's Ferry is not running anymore, but when we went, we crossed at White's Ferry. So you go towards Leesburg and around to get there. You can go Route 7. And so if people want to do that as a group, it's sort of well worth doing and fun. They also will have on the sunflowers, they'll have goldfinches, which are equally as pretty. But we have goldfinches here year round, so it's the indigo buntings that are like the prize. And it was my first trip there, and some guy said, "Don't you hate the photographers who come here the first trip and get a indigo bunting on a sunflower?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I hate those people." So, but part of it was again understanding the behavior of the birds. That's like number one in wildlife photography. There are also sunflower fields in Manassas, and you can go on their site and find out what stage their sunflowers are in, and sort of take a tour of the sunflowers. I don't know if you get the buntings on them like you do at this particular place, because it's unique where they have the wooded area along the edge where the buntings like to sort of sit and hang out and then dart over to get the seeds. And you need the sunflowers when they are at the point of full bloom, but have the whole middle area are seeds. And so the buntings are coming not to just be pretty and sing on the sunflowers. They want to eat those middle seeds. So it's sort of a little bit of timing on the fields. So, and there are sunflowers here. I remember Sally did a pretty sunflower picture back a ways. Definitely. That was just a field that you found, Sally, with the sunflowers?
It was out 522 going out from Winchester, and it was a sort of commercial enterprise. I mean, there was like a little market there where they sold different food items, and then they had the fields of sunflowers, and it was a pick your or cut your sunflower kind of thing. But you could just roam around as well and take pictures if you didn't want to buy any sunflowers. They didn't, monitor you at all. So I'm guessing that they'll have that again this year too. So yeah, and locally and close by, and not having to go into the DC area or in with all that traffic, it was a great place to take pictures.
Yeah, and they're just pretty. And sometimes the other thing that was happening is the bees were on the sunflowers too. And sometimes I'll just take a partial sunflower. Pam's saying it's Homestead Farm at Fruit Hill Orchard. So just you can take the whole field of sunflowers. You can just like do a whole thing on sunflowers. You can say I want to take and show the massive amount of them. I want to show the rows. I want to get really, really close and show just the middle and a part of the sunflower. I want to show the bees on them. They're just really fun. At the State Arboretum in the community garden, somebody grows sunflowers there, and I've been able to catch a few birds, especially the goldfinches on the sunflowers at the State Arboretum. But it's not a whole field of them. There's just a few of them that are poking up in the community garden. But yeah, sunflowers. I really want to like plant my own sunflower field at some point, just to be able to do a whole thing. And the really cool thing about sunflowers is that they turn during the day to follow the sun. So they're really cool. They're really cool to photograph. The Museum of the Shenandoah Valley always has beautiful gardens. There's always things to photograph there. And some of the area is more shaded. So you can get out of the harsh sun, particularly back near the Japanese tea garden area. It's usually cool there, and there's water that you can, fountains and different areas that you can take pictures of. And their native trails now too have photo opportunities along the hiking trails that are there. The hiking trails are open to the public. There's 2 different parking areas for them. Wednesdays are a free day at the museum. And then if you join, you have access to the gardens at any time. But definitely their roses are wonderful to just be able to set up and do lots of pictures of roses. Pam, anything you'd add about what's happening at the museum?
Let's see.
Oh, you just muted yourself. You're good. Oh, now you muted.
The
Pam,
yeah.
there.
Am I okay? You hear me now? Nope.
Yes.
The
Pam, you just muted yourself again. Sorry.
okay.
Hey, Pam, you're muted again for some reason.
One last try. The wetlands trail is pretty new, and that you go out on a raft type floating thing, because they wouldn't let them dig pylons into the ground there. And of course the bamboo forest too, that talk about shade. They had taken some trees down in there, and it wasn't open when I did the garden walk, but it probably is by now. But there's so many different, angles that you can take there. Like you said, the Asian garden, the roses, the spring garden, the wetlands, and now the new trails. It's just, and lots of birds around there. I did a field hike last Saturday morning, and the red-tailed hawks were flying around, and the sun was hitting on their tails, and it was just magnificent. The beauty of those birds flying around with the sun hitting them just right. So there's always something pretty to see there.
Good. So those are some of the different places, and of course the Arboretum, Blandy, the place I like to go in the summer heat there is the Native Plant Trail. Always has, that's a nice sort of way to get out of the heat is on that trail. Trying to think of the there are young that are in the boxes. Both the bluebirds have had their first clutches. The other place that if you really want to get out of the heat in Blandy is that, I'm gonna wait for my 11 o'clock nuthatch call. There's an entrance that's a back entrance that's, if you know where the ginkgo grove is, if you park at the ginkgo grove, you can walk down the more forested area, and there's a couple of trails in there too. And that's a really nice place. And even people don't usually visit the ginkgo grove in the summer, but the ginkgo grove, particularly if you walk back in sort of its L shape, if you walk back in the L and just sit in the grove, there's thrashers there. There's a couple of bluebird boxes that last time I was there were being occupied. There's usually deer that come through there. So a lot of times people will stay in the main area near the quarters building at the Arboretum, and forget that there's this whole back end of the Arboretum in Blandy Farm that's a little bit more natural, a little less cultivated, other than of course, the ginkgo garden. And it's really nice to walk in the woods there because it's cool and you can get away and there's good bird species there. So that's another area to go to in the heat of the summer. Right, so here's the challenge for this period, and I will get this out to people who weren't able to join us this time. Again, going along the themes of the summer reading program of the library, and anybody can sign up for summer reading. It's anything that you read. It doesn't have to be book club books. And for every book that you read, you go into a app and you log the book that you read, and it gives you a chance for a drawing of prizes. And some of the prizes are a year's pass to Shenandoah National Park and the state parks. And it helps the library because the library, for grants and different things, has to look at circulation and programs like summer reading. So even if you don't care about the little drawings and prizes, you help the library by logging the books that you've read, and you can do reviews. But that's, so this year we do it for adults and children, and our theme is Tales and Tales. So everybody, if you want to participate in this challenge between now and July, is to select a tale, create a single photograph that tells that tale, and you get a bonus point if you include a tale, T-A-I-L. So some of the themes are a tale of joy, a tale of odds, a tale of peace, a tale of motion, renewal, wonder, journey, love, determination, adventure, kindness, and we even have a tale of name your own if you don't like these categories. And what I'll do is, I know my site where people are posting is it can get a little bit confusing. So I'm going to create a new place to upload photos, and I'll also include this name and the date so that we make sure photos get updated in there, and get creative. This is it can be anything, and it doesn't have to have an animal tail in it. That's just something else to think about. Any questions about our challenge for this month?
Sharon, I have a question.
Sound like fun?
When is the, what's the timeline on this?
The timeline is, my July session, I think is, let me look at the July calendar. Sorry, I should know this, but I'm going I just go month to month. I think it's, I'm doing July 17th is
Okay.
the Zoom, and July 24th is the hands-on session. So let's say July 13th, because that will give me more time to make sure everybody's photos are in and I can find them.
Okay.
And I will send that out in an email message too. So.
Okay, super. Thanks.
Can we do more than one tale, or are we supposed to just do one? You know how I am with limits.
How about if I say you can do two,
Two.
not more than two?
Okay.
Mainly
I will
because having to sort through pictures, and I'm just I've been finding I haven't been spending as much time on my own pictures. So, and I'm hoping to go to Alaska 2 weeks from now. I'm hoping that I will be in a plane flying to Lake Clark. So
That's great.
if you had asked
Oh,
me last
great.
year if that was going to be possible, I would have said no way. But so thank goodness for vaccines. That's all I can say.
Yep.
Other
Sharon,
questions, comments, everybody?
I'm a little confused about select a tale. Is this like, do we find a book, like a children's book or something that we use, or?
It could be it's your own story. So you don't have to find a book. So the story, that your picture tells the story of joy. So it could be, if you wanted to incorporate a tail, it could be a dog wagging its tail. Or if it's a grandchild, it could be, splashing in water. So it could be anything that you want. Adventure, it could be it could tell the tale of someone starting a hike. Adventure, it could be whitewater rafting. Kindness could be, it could be June taking that dragonfly out of the spider's nest. Determination, just anything that you want, like the little so motion could be a kite, it could be a bike, it could be a dog running, anything that tells that story for you. So makes sense. And it would be great, something that also does summer. So. And anytime if you're working on something and you run into a stumbling block, just email me, or if you want to show me something, just email me. I like getting these questions. I got a question from Ingrid. She sent me 2 photos yesterday that she took of some bluets, and bluets are really difficult flowers because they grow in clusters and they're going every which way and they're tiny and they always have other stuff around them like grass. And so the she had depth of field. All of it was at a high, a really narrow f-stop with a lot of depth of field, and wondering why she wasn't happy with either of them. And the answer was because the grass was so far, close behind, everything was in focus. And sometimes we think, oh, flowers, I need lots of depth of field. Sometimes you want to do just the opposite and just focus on a single one of the bluets and blur everything else. So, what I had said to her in my response back is I would have used a really low f-stop given these conditions. So it's that sort of problem solving that I really love to do. Cece's asking what the bonus is. I'll have to think about that. Maybe we'll have to have a little prize. But we're definitely going to do hands-on. I can't do anything between now and when I leave for Alaska. I'm just too jammed up. But this summer, if I'm around and things start to present themselves, maybe we can meet up at the Arboretum or in Winchester at the museum on one of the Wednesdays and do some roses, because roses are really, really fun, and they're great examples of how to play with depth of field. So.
Another great lesson. Thanks, Sharon.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Sharon, I had a couple of questions about your pictures. The maidenhair fern that you showed us,